Alright, guys, welcome to episode 12 of Out of the Shadows. This week's episode is choosing who you want to be. In life, we do get to choose the type of person we want to be, the type of person we want to become, and we can develop certain attributes in ourselves that we want to accentuate. We can learn to control others that we might not like so much. We can further grow as a person. You get to choose who you want to be. This was a very foreign concept to me, especially when I was younger. I was very much of the mind that you kind of were who you were. You were born with certain characteristics, and if something didn't come naturally and easily to you, then you weren't going to have that skill or that personality trait. Now, do I still believe this? Absolutely not. That's not to say that people don't have a certain nature about them. Some people are naturally more aggressive, some are naturally compassionate, some are naturally more timid, some people are gifted as artists, some people are gifted as athletes, and that's just kind of, it comes very easily to them. But again, that's not to say that you can't develop other skills that you may not have been quote unquote born with. Now, an easy example of this in my life, for a very long time, I'd say probably most of my life, I was very timid, I was very shy, I was very much the guy who was kind of quiet, nervous. And in more recent months, I'd say the last year, I've become a lot more outgoing and talkative. I will engage with people who I may not know, and that very much wasn't me. So, whereas people who knew me for a very long time would kind of say, well, Matt's much more of a reserved kind of guy, he's usually quiet until you get to know him. There are definitely people who I've met in recent months who, if you told them that I was quiet and reserved, they would look at you like you were crazy. Because I've met a lot of people to where, like I said, I'll start a conversation, I'll start telling stories, I'll be very engaged and more outgoing. So the point of that is just to show that you can develop into different things. You can become more of the person you'd like to be. Now, that's not to say that if you're naturally shy or quiet, that's a bad thing. It's totally not. There's times to this day where I will still feel a little bit more uneasy and I will kind of revert to that quiet mode. But there's nothing wrong with it, because if someone's shy, does that mean that they're a bad person? They're not worth knowing? Absolutely not. It just means that they're not as outspoken, and that's fine. Everyone's different. That's just how life is. So, how was I able to further develop who I am? A lot of it comes down to your own personal beliefs. And I did a couple of videos on beliefs already and how to change your beliefs specifically. So please go watch those videos. They're great. However, in this video, I wanted to talk a lot more about how I personally changed my beliefs. And it started with a very simple concept. And that concept was to try. Several years ago, I was extremely depressed. I didn't really have a lot of faith in that I was going to get better, in that there were things that could help me get better. So I really had to fall back on simple logic. I decided and realized that if I tried, I created the potential to get better. I created the potential for progress. If I did nothing, I was guaranteed to stay stuck in where I was and fail, in a sense. So it was really that belief in trying that kept me going for a long time, that kept me going to therapy, that kept me seeing a psychiatrist, trying different medications, reading books, trying group therapy, just anything. I really I got to the point where I was like, well, you know what? If I try and I create this, maybe you'll get better. That's a hell of a lot better than you're definitely not getting better. So that's where it all started for me. Another really big part of it was my fascination with Bruce Lee. I had gotten really into martial arts, and this led me to Bruce Lee. We all know the name, I'm sure. And I started to study him and his fighting style, and one of my brothers actually brought me a book called Striking Thoughts. The book is solely dedicated to Bruce Lee's philosophies, and honestly, 90% of it is his philosophies on life in general. Very little has anything to do with martial arts specifically. Some things are relatable to both martial arts and life, but for the most part, it's life in general. How we perceive things, how one perhaps should perceive things, that sort of thing. And I highly recommend that book. But the point being, I really enjoyed it, and I started to take on these different beliefs that I had found there and really incorporate them into my life and part of who I was. So a few of these beliefs, just to mention them briefly. One was to go with the flow, to not anticipate an outcome. I think too often in life, we anticipate this negative outcome. We see it in our heads. We have a presentation to give at work, and we're pitching some idea, and we're super nervous, and we're thinking about going in there, and we're like, oh my God, I'm going to do so bad. I'm so nervous. Nobody's going to like this. This is going to be a disaster. Why? I just want this to be over. You're defeating yourself before it even started. So conversely, you can visualize a positive outcome, and that can be a very beneficial tool. However, there are times that I've found in my own life where I will then overthink it and try to have this quote unquote perfect vision of how it ought to go. And perfectionism, it can be very destructive. Trying to be perfect, it doesn't work. No one's perfect. We're all going to make mistakes. We're all human. That's what it is. If you aspire to and accept nothing less than perfection, you're going to have a lot of difficulties in life. So as I said, I found that in many situations in life, we need to just kind of let them unfold and respond accordingly. The next belief that I really took on was to absorb what is useful and discard what is useless from others' teachings. Now, I've mentioned this in previous videos, and it's a very simple concept, but I think it holds just so much truth. We learn things from other people. People have other things to offer. And some of it is applicable to our lives, and some of it isn't. So it's a matter of picking out what's useful for you and incorporating it into your own life, and obviously leaving behind what isn't. And lastly, to realize that there isn't a set or right way to do anything. There's no set pattern to follow. There's no ascribed way to live life in any situation. There's a million ways to do things. There's so many different ways of doing things. And everyone has such different personalities and experiences that different things work for different people. I can give you 1,000 of my ways, but none of them might work for you. Maybe 100 work for you, maybe 50, maybe 5. It all depends. Everyone is different. So that kind of ties back into absorbing what is useful and discarding what is useless. But the main point of this one being, don't get caught up in trying to find, quote unquote, the way of doing things. There's no such thing as the way or the best way. There's only the best way for you. So the point really is that for me, I was constantly reading this book. I was reading these philosophies. I had actually gotten a Bruce Lee calendar, and every month had a different quote. So it's right there on my wall. I was watching every possible documentary I could find on Bruce Lee. And without knowing it, I was constantly feeding my mind. And it was constantly just kind of seeping into my subconscious all these beliefs that I really felt strongly about and agreed with and wanted to incorporate into my own life. And in time, without really realizing it, I started to adopt and, put these beliefs into practice. Now, I'm not telling you to go out and obsess over Bruce Lee or someone else who really inspires you and come back to me in a few years and let me know how it went. There's a much more direct route. As I said, we get to choose. We get to choose who we want to be. So I'm going to get further into that, the aspect of actually choosing and these different tactics next week. Unfortunately, this is way too large a concept for me to cover in one video, and I actually have a lot of really good ideas. This topic has really inspired me. So I will have part 2 of this next week. Until then, guys, please like, share, and subscribe. Again, comment, what did you like? What didn't you like? What are you interested in me talking about in the future? Any questions? Direct message me on Instagram. On Instagram, I'm at Out of the Shadows Corvo. So I will see you guys next week. And until then, take care.